Hey everyone, so today I'm going to show you how to shoot and edit a time lapse. So I'm photographer TKNORTH. You can find me on Instagram at TK_North, and today we're talking about time-lapse. So time-lapse is a really interesting way to capture movement. It's something that's really brought me into photography, something that I love shooting, and something that still really excites me when I see a really good time-lapse. So time-lapse is also a really interesting way to try new things, try different things and push your creativity a bit, because there is so many different techniques and ways you can do it, and that includes things like hyperlapses. So if we think about normal video, for instance, this video that I'm filming right now talking to you is filmed in 24 frames per second. Now the difference with time-lapse, you end up playing it back at a similar speed, but the big difference being the time between each of those frames is a lot different. For instance, rather than 24 frames per second, you may be shooting 1 frame per second. So if I was filming at 1 frame per second right now, this is what it would look like. So basically with time-lapse, you're speeding up the movement or lapsing time, which is where you get the name time-lapse from. Now the most simple way to shoot a time-lapse, of course, is to speed up some video footage, but this does come with its problems. The biggest problem being when you speed up normal video footage, it's going to look quite choppy, jerky, jittery, because there's no motion blur. So the best way to shoot a time-lapse is to shoot photo footage and then compile it into a video later on when you're processing. So what equipment do you need to shoot a time-lapse? So first of all, you'll need a camera, of course. Now ideally you want one that shoots raw photos and has a full manual mode. So secondly, you'll need a tripod or something sturdy to mount your camera or phone to keep it nice and secure while you're shooting the time-lapse. So the third thing you're going to need is an intervalometer. What the heck is an intervalometer? It's basically just something that triggers your camera to shoot at a regular interval, so you don't have to stand there pressing the button for every frame. Now a lot of cameras do have them built in. For me, my 5D Mark IV has an inbuilt intervalometer, so I can go through, pick my interval and how many shots I want to shoot in a sequence. I usually just leave that at unlimited because then I can just stop the time-lapse on my own whenever it's finished. If you're unsure if your camera has one, just have a quick search online. You can find out where to find it in the settings if it does have one. Not to worry if your camera doesn't have an inbuilt intervalometer, it's easy to attach an external one. My other camera, the EOS R, does not have one, so I usually carry a spare intervalometer around, which is an external one that you can attach to your camera. So lastly, of course, you want to make sure you have a fully charged battery because your camera is going to be shooting there for a while. You're also going to need a memory card with plenty of space. Probably the one downside I have with time-lapse is the amount of hard drives I go through from shooting so many time-lapses. It does take up a lot of memory, but for me, it's worth it. So you've got all your gear. Let's talk more about composing your shot and also which interval to use for different scenes. So when you're deciding on your composition, really think about what movement will be occurring in the scene. The thing that makes interesting time-lapse is the movement occurring and the change in movement from each frame to frame. So once you've thought about what's actually going to be moving through your scene, the speed of that movement is then going to determine what interval you want to set. So here's a few examples of different intervals that I usually select. So for instance, an interval of 1 second or less can be good for fast moving water. It can be good for things like drive lapses, hyperlapse. So an interval of 1 to 2 seconds is good for things like traffic or crowds. It can also be good for really fast moving clouds. An interval of about 2 to 4 seconds can be good for kind of average moving clouds. So 6 to 8 seconds can be good for things like sunrise, sunset. Usually I'd go to at least 8 seconds just so you're not shooting too many frames over a long event. So a longer interval, say 15 to 30 seconds, can be good for things like slow moving shadows. It can be good for the sun or the moon rising. Things like stars, if you're shooting astro time lapses, it can be anywhere from 15 to 60 seconds. Of course, you can have an even longer interval. If you want to shoot something like a plant growing construction project, you'll have a lot longer interval again. So you've got your gear, you know what you want to shoot, all ready to go. You just need to select your camera settings. So it's quite simple when shooting a time-lapse. Wherever possible, you want to shoot everything manual. That means shooting in manual mode, selecting a manual ISO, selecting manual focus, and selecting a manual white balance. So the reason you want to shoot everything manual is to keep the settings consistent, make sure they're not jumping around and changing and you're not getting any flickering of your settings. If you're trying to shoot day to night, sunrise, sunset, I'm going to do a more advanced tutorial later on, so stay tuned for that. I'll pop the link up when it's ready. But for today, we're just going to talk through shooting all manual. Now, the most important thing in terms of your settings when you're shooting a time lapse is your shutter speed. So this is what's going to give you the motion blur. If you have a really fast shutter speed, it's just going to look like sped up video. So that's where you want to take advantage of shooting photos, really slow down your shutter speed. That can sometimes mean if you're shooting in broad daylight, you may need an ND filter so you can bring that shutter right down. Now for most time lapses, I try and stay to a shutter speed slower than 1/60, but often I'll try and go a lot slower than that. So when I go through and process a couple of time-lapse examples here in a sec, I'm going to show you the difference between a fast shutter speed and a slow shutter speed. Fast shutter speed, you will get a lot more jerky movement. The slower shutter speed, it's going to look a lot smoother. So that's why you want to think about your shutter speed. You may need an ND filter, as I said, depending on the scene that you're shooting. Another handy tip when you're setting up your time-lapse ready to shoot, if your camera allows, go into the settings and start a new folder on your memory card. This is going to make it a lot easier to import later on. You're going to know where it starts and finishes. So settings are all there, you're ready to go. Next question, how long should you leave the camera there shooting? It really depends on the event you're trying to capture, how long that's occurring, and how many seconds of video you want. So as an example, things that aren't strictly a timed event, I'm usually looking for anywhere from about 10 to 15 seconds of video. So usually I'll shoot about 300 photos. If your end result video is at 30 frames per second, 300 frames is going to give you 10 seconds of video. So always think about your frame rate. You can use an app like PhotoPills where you can put in all your numbers, how long you're shooting for, things like that. So it can calculate things like how many shots you need to take, how long you should leave it shooting for, all different things depending on the numbers that you put in. So that's really handy as well. So you've shot your time-lapse sequence. Today we're just going to show through a really basic way of editing your time-lapse and putting it into a video using Lightroom and Premiere Pro. So in my usual workflow, I would also usually use LR time-lapse. I'm going to do a full video running through LR time-lapse, so I'll pop a link up to that when it's ready. Now, the reason I use LR time-lapse is it gets rid of flickering. It's really good for shooting holy grail sequences or your day to night time lapses. It's also really useful if you end up shooting in aperture priority and you need to save it. Levels out and saves a lot of time lapses that you'd usually think aren't savable. There is a free version. It's quite limited though, so if you're unsure if you want to buy it, check out the free version, give it a trial. If you're going to be shooting more time lapses, I highly recommend purchasing it because it is very valuable and essential in my workflow when I'm processing time lapses. But today we'll just jump into Lightroom, give a quick edit and then export and show you how you can open it up straight in Premiere Pro ready as a video. Firstly, we're going to open up Lightroom. Now, because you're going to edit all the photos in Lightroom, usually I use that as an import as well. In this case, I've already got them on the hard drive, but I'm going to import them into Lightroom. So I'll get my folder, the short shutter one, which I want to open up. They're all ticked. It will import them where they're already located. So I'm going to import. Now you can see as I open it up, it is quite dark in these images, quite a bit underexposed. The reason I did that is because the sky was quite bright in the background. And this comes to the other great advantages of shooting raw photos to shoot your time lapse. It means you're gonna have a really great dynamic range when it comes to editing. Far, far better than if you shot it as a normal video. So let's go through, apply a really quick edit. I might even just put a quick preset on just to make this even quicker because this video is not about editing itself. So there's a really basic edit. I don't want to spend too much time on it. You can see the before and after. It's just brightened it up, a little bit of blue. Now, all I'm going to do for a really simple time lapse is select my entire sequence. Select, I'm going to go to sync, make sure everything's checked, synchronize, and copy those settings over to the entire sequence. Because you shot in full manual, the settings are the same, you're not going to get any flicker. Of course, You can fix that up if there is a bit of a flicker, and that's where software like LR Timelapse is super useful. So once you've copied all your settings across to every photo in that sequence, you're ready to export. Now when I export, I want to export the files as large as possible, so I just go full size JPEG. I've got 370 photos in this particular sequence, so to export them at a full size JPEG is going to take quite a bit of time. So make sure the entire sequence is selected. You're going to hit export. Now I'm just going to go full size JPEG. You want to make sure that you select custom name or anything within a sequence. So this will name them whatever you decide. Let's just go time lapse. It'll name them TL1, TL2, TL3, so on. Now, because they're numbered in this way, when you open it up in Premiere Pro, if you tick a little box, it will automatically open it up into video. So that's very important. Let's go through and export them. So once that's finished exporting from Lightroom, we're going to open up Premiere Pro. Start a new project. You can call that whatever you like. I'm going to call it timelapse 1. I'm just going to keep the settings that it automatically opens up because you can change those later if you want to. So I'm going to import my sequence, double click, open it up. So here it is. This is the sequence that I've just exported. I'm going to select the first photo, come down to options, make sure this box is ticked. And just by selecting that first one, it's going to grab the entire sequence. So import. So I bring that over to the timeline and play it back. So there you have your time lapse. You can continue to play around with that in Premiere Pro, or you can export it ready to use elsewhere. Again, just comparing that back to another time lapse taken on the same day but with a slower shutter speed. So you can see you get a lot more motion blur and those cars look a lot smoother than they do with the faster shutter speed. So there you have it, how to shoot and edit a pretty basic time lapse. I hope you found this video useful and picked up a few time lapse tips. If you're interested in using LR time lapse and you want to know how to shoot a full day to night sequence, the holy grail sequence, remember to subscribe and hit that notification button because I will be doing the LR time lapse tutorial very soon. I hope this video has inspired you to go out and shoot some time lapses. Maybe you're stuck inside like most of us, so maybe you can shoot some from your balcony or backyard. But as always, I do recommend giving it a try getting started because the more you do it, the more you will pick up and learn as you go. So that's it from me. Thanks so much for watching. I'm TKNORTH. Hope to see you guys soon. Bye for now.